Hi, and thanks for joining the S.J. Child Show. The S.J. Child Show brings value to families through education and resources. But the S.J. Child Show isn't just about me, it's about us as a community. Join me as we help educate and support our community, help bring kindness and love and inclusion to all. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen and watch. I really appreciate all the support from all of the viewers and listeners, and I just want to let you know I want you to join me on this journey. Come and follow my social media, and let's do this together. Enjoy the show. Introducing Autism Vehicle Home Safety Kits, Emergency Responder, alert stickers, personal profiles with autism needs and a communication board, masks and earplugs, keeping families and emergency responders educated and safe. Get yours today at sjchilds.org. Helping autism families impact their child's developmental milestones through home relocation, community resources, and home designs. For every 3 homes Natalie Castro sells, she funds and designs a sensory room for a community center servicing individuals with autism. She volunteers to coach law enforcement, first responders, and ER nurses how to have a positive experience for individuals on the autism spectrum. Hi, and welcome to the S.J. Childs Show. I'm your host, S.J. Childs, and today I have Elizabeth Becker with me. She is an autism mom, and an author, a writer, professor, and just a wonderful, well-rounded human being that is going to share some amazing information with us today. So thank you so much for being here today, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Sarah, for letting me be on your show.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm one of what they coined a long time ago is I'm one of the pioneers of the autism movement. My son, Matt, was born in 1986 and diagnosed in 1988. So we've been doing this autism journey a really long time. And because I'm a scientist and because I have that scientist nerdy brain, I took notes the whole time. And I wanted to understand my son, and I wanted him to be able to communicate with me. At his week-long investigation as to what was wrong with my son, he was hospitalized for an entire week at the Kluge Center in Charlottesville. And we had a whole team of doctors were checking on him every day. Somebody else would come in, they would run all these tests. And at the end of the week, they sat my husband and I down and they said that my son was severely autistic, but they didn't like to give that severe moniker to him because he had one thing that was lacking, and that was that he did not injure himself. And because he didn't injure himself, they switched that diagnosis to moderate severe autism. And that was followed right after with he needs to be institutionalized. Now, I can't even imagine taking a 2-year-old and putting him in an institution. I can't, that does not even compute in my brain.
Unfathomable.
So no,
agreed.
I rejected it. And when I told him that I wasn't going to do that, they warned me and told me that I didn't know what I was getting into and that I was going to harm my family by taking him home. That's the reality of where we started.
Misinformation 101, right?
Yeah, well, it was 1 in 10,000.
Yeah.
And doctors just didn't see it in their entire careers. They did not see one case of autism. So when they did, they were unsure of it. They did not have the information that they have now.
Yeah.
They didn't know about it as much as they do now. So you're looking before all of that information became available. As far as they were concerned, Matt was more like a robot. He was unfeeling. He would never be able to learn anything. He would stay he would grow up physically, but mentally he would never change. And that was the dire stuff that they hit me with. And I knew that was baloney.
Yeah. Good for you.
You know, when you're
Yeah.
a scientist nerd like I am, you see things deeper.
Yeah.
And I had spent the time watching Matt go from a nice, normal, everyday chase the cat around the house child to this one that would sit behind chairs and rock back and forth and not look at me anymore. And I knew there was a transition going on, and I knew it had to do with his brain, and I knew something was wrong with him. I watched him have petit mal seizures. Petit mal seizures are where you can't tell that they're having a seizure, except for they stop. Everything stops. Their eyes don't blink. They don't move. They're just all of a sudden frozen for a little bit. And Matt had those repeatedly over and over in that time frame. So I knew he was having damage. There was damage going on, and I knew something was up. I didn't have a name for it, and I didn't have any way to treat it. And I sought out the doctors to figure out what it was. And once they gave me the name for it, at least I had that.
Yeah.
The unknown is awful. When you don't know something, that's an awful feeling. But once you have a name to it, that seems to help. Just the idea that you have a name. The problem is their idea of how to help and my idea of how to help, that was not the same. So I took him home, and I thought, what I see in my son is somebody who can learn. I see that there's curiosity in the way that he held things. He would pick something up, and he might not hold it the way a normal child would hold it. He might have a car in his hand and hold it upside down, but he was looking at it, and that's curiosity.
That's observation. Yeah, exactly.
You're watching a child look at something, that they're thinking. So this was not an unthinking child. It was tiny little glimpses like that I knew they were wrong in their assumption that he'd never be able to do anything. So I get him home, and my first thing was to label everything in my house. I took out pieces of paper and tape and pens, and I labeled the wall, lamp. I mean, I went around the house. I labeled everything. Everything was labeled. I knew that he didn't like to touch certain things, so I made a great big. It was like a bowl, great big bowl, Tupperware bowl of beans, different kinds of beans. And I would have him watch me put his car under all those beans. And for him to retrieve that car, he had to put his hands through all that. So I was trying out different textures with him. And I know that he loved water. So I used water a lot to help him just to get stimulated enough to be able to look at me in the face every once in a while. He always kept his eyes cast down. It was just really hard for him to get his head up, but I never forced it. I'd ask him to look at me, but you can't. I felt that I couldn't force that, because evidently that hurt. The way that he would cast his eyes down meant something was going on. Something about looking up at a person's face was hard for him.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to make him fear me. So I let him guide me.
Yeah.
And I'm a very curious person. So I've watched a lot of stuff. I was watching him all the time, and he was communicating. He just wasn't using speech. And I watched him use things like his body language and gestures, and over time it turned into all kinds of cool stuff. The very first was touch. And when he was upset over something, I would just simply take the palm of my hand and lay it on his cheek. And that first thing, he would just like take that away. But over time, when he'd hurt himself, instead of crying, he'd just come over, he'd grab my hand and put it on his cheek.
Comfort. Yeah.
And it became something that he came to really like.
Yeah.
And then there was one day when I was the one that was upset. And I would, you know how life gets to you, and every once in a while you just have bad days.
Yeah.
And I was the one that was crying, and he found me and took his hand and put it on my cheek. That's massive communication.
Those moments,
right? I mean,
I agree.
Just through touch,
Yeah.
he was confirming to me that he cared. He
Yeah.
cared about me. There's an empathy there,
Yeah.
which that they had told me he's never going to have empathy. Yes, he did. He had empathy right off the bat. He had empathy at a very early age. The eye contact came very slowly. That took years. And when he finally, and our eyes would meet, and he could only hold it for maybe a second or two, and then he'd drop his eyes back down. That got longer and longer.
Yeah.
Until, now, Matt is 36 years old, and he looks at me in the eyes, and he can keep my gaze for quite a while before he has to turn away. So he's doing really good at being able to do that. You can't do that with everybody. It has to be a face that he knows.
Yeah.
You can't look at a stranger like that. He still diverts his eyes for strangers. But for people that he knows, he can actually keep that eye gaze now.
That is
Other things that he did, one of my favorites was gestures. People think gestures as in bye-bye and that kind of thing. Matt used his gesture as a cool body language. Sorry about the phone.
It's okay.
It happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Well, real life, folks.
My car warranty or something, yeah. So Matt was already in the school system. He entered the school system. He was only 2.5 years old when he entered into the preschool kind of thing. And then he moved up. And as he moved up, he didn't have any language. And he was in a first grade classroom for special needs children. And nobody in there had autism but him. They would start at the beginning of the day by going through the alphabet, and Matt would dive underneath the table. He didn't put his hands over his ears because the whole class was doing the A, B, C, and he couldn't take that. But at the same time, he would go look up at the ABCs across the blackboard. So he was putting the 2 and 2 together. He just couldn't take the noise. And I know this because I used to, pop in when the teachers least expected me.
Yeah.
And I was in the back of the classroom. I told him I was there for an observation day. And I'd just sit in the back and watch and see what he did with the classroom. They didn't give him a lot of attention of anything. And I asked them about this, and they said, well, Matt can't learn. Matt doesn't learn and all this. And I said, well, he's watching those ABCs, even though he's doing this, he's watching you go over those ABCs. And they couldn't believe that, that's just a parent being hopeful, right? They're just a parent being hopeful. Well, in that same time frame, it was spring, and we had the kids outside, and Matt's over on the hillside, and it's very sunny, and all of a sudden he just drops everything he's doing, and he stands very still, and his body starts doing this number and twirling and twisting, and every time he'd make a new movement, he'd look over his shoulder. So I was interested in what is he looking at over his shoulder. So I got up and moved to that part of the deck to where I could see what was behind him, and that was a shadow. So I was waiting for him, and I was watching him do those. And as he did them, he was making the letters of the alphabet. He was making the A, the B, the C, and he went in order A to Z beautifully.
So
and I was just so thrilled watching this, and I clapped, and I was going, guys, come here, you gotta watch this. So everybody came over, and we're all watching. I said, Matt, do that again. And he was smiling, and it was just like, my mom finally gets it kind of thing.
Hey.
And he just all of a sudden started doing it again. Well, my stepdaughter, which it was only like a year older than him, was going to go out there and do it with them, right? So she gets out there, and she's watching him do it, and he would stop what he was doing and go over and fix her body.
Oh, that was cute.
Right? She had to make sure her arms were like this and like that. And so he was also teaching
Engaging
another
and I
child
love
his
that.
communication.
Oh my gosh.
So when we have a school day, of course, I go into the classroom and I said, Matt knows his ABCs. And I said, I want you to just keep an open mind and watch this. And I asked Matt to please do the alphabet dance. And so he did. He started doing it, and they just sat there with their mouth open. They're just like, and that started something brand new. All of a sudden, the teachers got excited about the possibility of being able to reach this child that they thought was unreachable. And they started to think outside the box on how to teach him and how to assess what he knew and what he didn't know. And you could not use speech. You couldn't use a written test. You had to think outside the box in order to figure out what does he actually know and what does he need help with. So that's where the education system finally just kicked in. And from that moment on, every grade that he went into, I went in and spoke to the teachers, and I'd go in. I always did the sneak up on them and appear thing.
Yeah.
Keep them on their toes.
I agree.
But I used to go in, and they got so used to me coming in. It was just not a big deal anymore. So I got to teach the teachers about my son. He also had I got him a paraprofessional that was with him all day long. So it was just for him to keep him on task. So as he grew up and started to write and started to do things that other children did, and he actually started doing homework during the day at school, he had this paraprofessional that would keep him on task. And her biggest job was basically when he'd start getting distracted was to tap and get him.
Oh, the knocking. Mom. Oh, I love it.
That's good, dog.
Yep.
Yeah, so okay.
Right. I have 3 of them, and they sound about as big as mine. So
she's a German Shepherd.
we have Great Pyrenees. So yes, the
big dogs. Yes,
yeah, that is so funny. Oh, great.
She was tapping, and she would keep him on task. And he moved from the special ed to a regular classroom in the 3rd grade. He did a 3rd grade of special ed, and then the very next year he did 3rd grade again in a regular classroom. And I didn't want him to just jump to 4th grade. I wanted him to spend the year getting used to the idea of other children and the routines. And having him hear the same material again was the routine that he needed to keep focused. So I keep his confidence up. I didn't want to throw him into the deep end. So I held him back one year, and that turned out to be a really good idea because he started making straight A's, and then the kid made straight A's all the way through high school. He graduated a National Honors student.
Oh my
goodness. This is somebody who couldn't speak very much, and he couldn't interact with people. And I mean, Matt's always going to be moderate severe. That's where he's always going to be, but that doesn't affect his IQ. And so he was able to graduate number 4 in his class, and he was the first autistic person to graduate high school. So, you know, we were hitting those.
Oh my goodness.
We were hitting those hurdles and figuring out ways to overcome this one and figuring out ways to overcome that one. And so every year we had something different that we were trying to tackle. He did play sports for a little bit. He played t-ball. That was fun.
Oh, yeah.
T-ball is one of those things where no child knows what they're doing.
Yeah, right.
None of them do.
Herding kittens on the field.
The butterflies that come by in the outfield, they're more interested in the butterflies than the ball. So Matt really didn't stand out very much.
That's funny. Yeah, definitely. I remember those years.
But for him to play t-ball, we had to teach him how to run from one base to the next.
Yeah.
And I had papers out in my front yard, you know, bases 1, 2, 3 kind of thing, and then the home plate. And I was bribing him to go from one plate to the next one with peanut M&Ms.
Oh.
Okay, come to this one. Now you get some more M&Ms. Now you get, right? So I was bribing him all the way around. Well, that turned out to be a problem when he was actually playing T-ball and he got out. Yeah, well, he got out at first base. Well, he'd never gone backwards ever.
Yeah.
He always went forward, and he needed to go to second and third and then to home. And the coach was the umpire was all upset, and the other coach from the other team was all upset because Matt refused to come off.
Oh. You know, at that moment, don't you wish those adults could just have a little bit of flexibility and remember, just give the kid
his coach was laughing the whole time.
Yeah.
He thought it was hilarious. So his coach got it, but the other team's coach did not.
Sure. Oh gosh.
So I've got a lots of stories of what we ran into, and what I did right and then what I did wrong, and had to backtrack and redo over again. And
I love that you said that.
It was constantly a learning process.
Yeah.
And
trial and error.
It is. All of it's trial and error. So the books that I've written, the first one was just stories of encouragement for parents that were just getting those newly diagnosed children, right? And they didn't know what they were headed. And so those were stories to let them know that this is okay. You're going to be fine. There's some enjoy some of these funny moments that you have.
Yeah.
And never give up the hope. Always strive to keep that hope, because sometimes days do feel like they're hopeless, but they're not. They're not hopeless. And the whole time that I was with him, I was, like I said, I was taking all these notes because I'm a nerd. And so when I finally wrote the second book, that was the book I wanted to write all along. It was the book on how to communicate when somebody doesn't speak.
Yes.
That one is this one, Listening
Wonderful.
With the Heart. This is a guide to understanding nonverbal communication in the autistic child for parents, teachers, and professionals.
Beautiful.
So it's geared to everybody. The language is not all these massively long words.
No.
I write like I talk. So I just explain it as if I were explaining it to my students in college. I explain it the same way, and it's gone over pretty well. So I'm very happy. It's the very first book, of course, because I'm a pioneer. It's the very first book on communication in nonverbal autistic individuals. So, you got a chance to see my website.
Yeah,
right?
It's
Did
great.
You see the world?
It's great. It's amazing. And I can't wait to watch all the YouTube videos. I just only had a few hours, so I didn't have enough time.
Did you see the globe map?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We hit 8 million people a few years back, and then my counter broke.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Well, hey, right? It doesn't. I don't know how many.
I never replaced the counter, but you take a look at the globe. Matt's basically known all over the world.
I love that.
We are the biggest secret in autism, and he's everywhere around the globe, but we're not on that nightly news thing. We're not on autism channels, and we don't pop up all the time. So like I said, we're one of those big secrets.
We're revealing more now, aren't we?
Yeah, there you go.
A little bit more light shining on it. I think that's a wonderful thing. And, let us know, where can we find the books and where can we find the website? Give us that information. And of course, I'll type it up and make sure it's all written and typed in the descriptions.
Well, the website is worldaccordingtomatt.com. It started off as a blog when blogs first started taking off. I started my first blog in 2010, and it was the first one written on an autistic individual. But it never occurred to me to put autism in the title.
Oh.
So nobody, it doesn't
Sure.
get out there much if you're trying to search for autism, but the internet was kind of new. And
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing. Believe me, I did not know what I was doing. So when I wrote the book, World According to Matt, I put the autism first. Autism and the World According to Matt. That's the very first book. The second book, Listening with the Heart. Both of these can be found on Amazon. My pen name is just Liz Becker. So you just type in Liz Becker and autism and you'll see they'll pop up.
Wonderful.
And Barnes and Noble also.
Great.
So they're on those two big areas there. I haven't really publicized my books much. They take off by word of mouth, and they've been out there for years and they're still selling. So
that's amazing.
That tells me that people share with their friends.
Right.
And that makes me feel really good.
Agreed.
That people like the book that much.
Yeah.
But I keep trying to keep my focus on my son, because he still needs help.
Yeah.
He moved out. He's been in his own apartment.
So cool. I was waiting to talk about that. I'm so excited to hear that. How cool is
he
that?
Is living independently in his own apartment.
Now, did you ever go back to any of those doctors and stick your finger and say, you should, I told you, or you, nah.
I always wanted to, but no, I
know,
never did.
right? I actually went, it's funny, and I won't take up too much of your time or anything talking about it, but I went when our son was diagnosed. His pediatrician had recognized it when he was 16 months old. And so, when I had first found out, I'm honestly, I was so angry at the doctor. I was so angry at the doctor. And I mean, it was the truth, and he was honest, and he was telling me exactly what I needed to hear, but I didn't know how to take that, and I didn't know anything, and so I went to him maybe not 10 years, probably 8 years later. And I had also written just a children's book about DJ, and I took it to him and I said, I was so angry with you. I resented you. But now I'm sorry that I felt that way, because now I see that, you gave me the freedom and the independence, and that we both needed to get through this together. And I gave him a copy of the book and everything. And so it turned out to be like such an amazing, just experience to see it go full circle.
Yes. With Matt, a lot of parents have told me about that devastation feeling when you first hear it. And I didn't have that.
Sounds like you kind of said like you knew a little bit, but you already had kind of an idea ahead of time.
Yeah, and the year before Matt was born, my middle son died.
Oh,
and a death of a child, that's a very permanent thing. There's nothing you can do about it. Nothing compares to that.
Perspective.
My son, Matt was alive, and to me, what they had described to me, that was not something terminal.
Yeah.
And to me, that was good news.
Yes.
So,
I love that.
I did not hear in my head. I didn't hear the totality. I remember them saying it, but in my mind, I'm just kind of blowing it off.
Yeah.
As okay. So what you're telling me is he's going to live. I mean,
Yes.
So
certainly. That's such a different perspective to have of that.
So I didn't. Yeah, and I hear the pain in other people when they talk about first getting that first diagnosis, and I just never had that.
Yeah.
I never had that, and I'm pretty sure it's because in my mind he was still alive. Yeah. And that's all I needed to know. I knew something was wrong with his brain, and I didn't know if this was going to be something that was going to kill him. I didn't know what was coming.
Yeah.
So just to hear that it wasn't fatal to me was just like, okay, I'll deal with it.
News. Exactly. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, and since then, and there was a long time where the same thing, I kind of, having gone through those feelings, advocated for other parents. It's okay. And then the day comes where I have an interview with this amazing autistic adult that tells me the moment my parents told people how devastating it was that I had this diagnosis, my heart was broken and I felt this way and that. And I went, oh my gosh, like I had no idea, like that was not my intent, of course. And he wasn't to him, but now then I recognized and thought, okay, there's a new way to talk about this. There's a different way to describe it. And now I just say, you know, it's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to, you know, have questions or to be confused, but I don't use that devastation word anymore. I have much more compassion about how that could make someone feel. And I love this learning process because when we know, we can do better, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's wonderful.
So, and Matt has, when he graduated from high school, it took me 10 years, almost 10 years to prepare him for living on his own. But that's what he wanted. That was his desire, his lifelong wish, his big goal. And I was going to move a mountain to do this.
Yeah.
It was okay. Well, what does he need to do to be able to do this? And we wrote out a massive list of things he had to accomplish in order for him to live on his own. And he tackled those things because his desire to have that independence was so strong that if I said, okay, you can't have an apartment of your own unless you can actually cook yourself a meal. Right. So we got into all of that, and he approached that as this is not a chore. I'm trying to do something that for myself.
Yeah.
And he did. He does his own laundry. He cooks for himself. He cleans his apartment. He takes care of his cat. He's doing excellent.
Fantastic.
Now he lives in an apartment complex for the elderly and the disabled. So most of his neighbors are elderly.
A little bit older than him.
Grandmas and grandpas, right? And
do they just love him though, and like kind of give him that compassion and sweetness? I think that's so sweet.
A couple of years back, I had just stopped over at Matt's. I was getting out of my Jeep, and his neighbor came out and met me on the sidewalk and said, "Did Matt tell you what happened?" And I said, no, most likely not. Unless unless I already know what happened, I can't bring it out of him. He doesn't. He does not initiate. He doesn't initiate conversation. And I said, "So why don't you tell me what happened?" And he told me that one of the elderly ladies that lived there went out to the mailbox, slipped on the ice, fell into the road, fell in the curb, and basically broke her hip. She couldn't move. So here it is, below zero weather out. She doesn't have anybody to help her, and she is laying down on the ice. And at that particular moment in time, Matt is going to his mailbox, and when he comes out, he sees her, and she is crying and asking for help. And he went over to her and said, it's okay, I'll get somebody. And he went over to his neighbor and knocked on their door and brought them out and showed that person,
wow,
this is, look what is happening. And he wanted to stay with her until the ambulance came. And when the ambulance pulled up, then he went back into his apartment, and he never said a word, not a word to me. So he basically saved her life. I mean,
he was a hero.
Hypothermia and broken bones. And Matt doesn't go to strangers, and he knocked on the door of a neighbor, and he brought them over to where that lady was. I mean,
just that innate.
Oh my gosh, right?
To happen.
There's so much more to my son under the surface than I know.
Yeah.
And I really want to know all of it. And so I even at this late years, I'm still peeling back layers. There's still more of him under there that I don't know yet. Yeah. And I want to know him. I want to know him all the way through. So he teaches me an awful lot. And I love the fact that his neighbor felt so wonderful about it that he had to come out and tell me.
Yeah.
Because he knew Matt would never be able to initiate that conversation. You wouldn't.
Yeah.
And that felt really good, just to know that their neighbors come out and say,
Yes, definitely. That they can be trusted and you can trust them to help him if anything were to occur like that too. So that's incredible. Oh my,
yes,
it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. And I look forward to staying connected with you and keeping in touch and, finding out other things that you find out and learning more and everything. So I just love it. I am really grateful for your time, and I'll make sure to have all of the links in the description for for the books and for the website. And of course, if there's any social media you want anyone to follow or anything, or is just the website good?
oh, I'm on Facebook. I have Autism in the World According to Matt.
Perfect.
So that's one of the Facebook pages.
Great.
And I also have author Liz Becker. So I have
great.
that also, that Facebook page.
Okay, super.
So
Make
for
sure to
both of them.
definitely go and
Yeah.
support her, go and support Liz and Matt, and check out the amazing website and the books that I'm really excited to look more into and discover more about everything. And I'd love to catch up with you in the future and find out, what has changed, or if he has any new situations or experiences that come up, and that'd be exciting. So thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I loved it. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
The SG Child Show, produced by SG Childs LLC. Thanks to all my viewers and listeners for your continued love and support. And thank you to the guests of the SG Child Show. It's been an honor to have you on the show. Thank you to everyone who continues to support me. Go to my social media and let's build this community together through kindness, compassion, and education for all.